Good morning, everyone. I guess we'll get started. Welcome to Potentia's first live virtual event of 2024. This is your first time on a call with us. This is where we hear from experts, employers, self-advocates about their experiences and their recommendations on how we can improve employment outcomes for ND professionals and improve the world of work in the process. I'm Dave Thompson, Director of Strategic Programs for Potentia Workforce, and I am super stoked to be with all of you today. Potentia supports companies in becoming more neuroinclusive through customized consulting, training, recruiting solutions. And today's conversation specifically is focused on kind of one of the curb cut benefits of what we do at Potentia, which is driving innovation forward in the workplace, both for ND professionals and entire workforces and companies. We'd like to discuss kind of two major areas. One, how innovation can better support and embrace the minds of all employees in the workforce. And two, how a truly neuroinclusive employer will empower ND employees to drive innovation in the workforce. It's a really exciting topic for me because despite not being a techie person, one of kind of the biggest steps forward I've made in my journey is to identify as a creator and an innovator and kind of someone who challenges existing systems and processes that don't work for me, and also someone who embraces ongoing innovations to figure out what works best for me on kind of my ND journey. And before I get to introduce our amazing guests, thank you so much for being here, folks. Just some details around the structure for today. The chat, the cameras, and the mics are going to be turned off. For audience members, just use the Q&A feature for any questions, and we hope to get to some of them today. If not, we will make sure to follow up with all of you with any resources or any answers, and feel free to get in touch with the panelists. And with that said, I'm so happy to have you all. Gloria, welcome. If you could, just introduce yourself and share a bit about what brings you here today. What's your why for being here?
Thanks for in the introduction and for having me here. I'm Gloria Folaron, and I'm one of the founders of Lean Time. Lean Time is a project management system that brings together the big picture of work, but does it in a way that uses behavioral science and AI to be engaging, really focusing on building features that work for the way our brains work. So focusing on features that help support folks with ADHD, dyslexia, and autism.
And what is it? Do you have a personal connection to this that you'd like to share? That's kind of your why behind how you thought of it?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago after seeing symptoms in my daughter. Suddenly, my entire life came into focus and made sense. And one of the things that I really struggled with throughout my entire career was that I never really liked to do something if I didn't understand the purpose. And so that meant when I was making big old task lists, if I couldn't connect my task to something that was actually impactful, I probably didn't keep to it very well. And I saw this over and over again in our tools, and we have tried, my technical co-founder, who I'm married to, who is also neurodivergent. What we've discovered over the years is he's tried to figure out ways to get me on track and in process. We've really seen that this is something that is not just a me problem, but a bigger problem in how we communicate information around in the workplace.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I knew we'd all get along today. And Piper, what about you? Introduce yourself and share what brings you here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I am a Caucasian late 30s cisgender female who presents with a flair for 1940s fashion. I am here today because 2 years ago, I discovered through brain scans more about myself, and it not only helped me realize my potential, but it assisted me with my 8-year-old son who is autistic. And the more individuals I've come to meet with my neurotype, the more I've been kinder to myself and learned more about how to utilize my skills, being aware of dopamine deficiencies, dopamine reward systems from ADHD, and much like Gloria said, the understanding of context The context and reasoning behind things goes a very long way for neurodivergent brains. So it is my research heart that has really driven me to learn more and share as much as I can about what I find from other individuals who are doing their best to navigate a neurotypical world.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And Jeff, what about you, our CEO and co-founder of Potentia Workforce? What brings you here to talk about innovation and neurodiversity today?
Thank you, Dave, and welcome to our esteemed guests. We're delighted to have you guys here. For those who've been here before, you've heard me tell this story. I was running a global staffing company. My teenage son, Charlie, who had been diagnosed autistic when he was younger, was doing great in school, but was progressing. And I really had to admit that as a dad, I didn't have a good picture of what adult autism or what his life was going to be like when he was 26 or 36. And I wanted to continue to help support him in whatever ways I could. And I realized I didn't really have a good picture of what that was going to look like. So went on a journey as a dad just to try and find out what that looked like. And through that, talked to a number of people who really showed me the business potential that existed with leveraging neurodistinct individuals and their amazing talents within the business world. And that's sort of the story that I've told. I'll add a piece to it here that I think will hopefully be relevant. So that piece of the story was very much about Charlie, and it's very much true. I will add to that for me, at the time I was running a global staffing company, I was reporting to a board. It had been a role that I'd been pointing towards for a long time in my career. And yet when I talked to the people who are running these programs, I was immediately struck by the purpose and the sense of mission that they had and how much joy they took in what they were doing. And I reflected back on what I was doing, and I wasn't feeling as much purpose and as much joy. So for very selfish reasons, I decided I wanted more of that. And that's the second piece of why Potentia exists today. So delighted to be here and delighted to have such a great panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. I've heard it before, but I don't get tired of it. So let's dig into some specific innovation. There are so many exciting tech tools and innovations and changes being made to the workplace every day. We're going to zoom in on a few today, thanks to our panelists who are kind of subject matter experts in certain areas. So we'll start with Piper, if that's okay. You're an artist, a curator, a professor, a researcher, a big picture thinker, right? And you have a flair for 40s fashion. So what brought you, I don't want to give it all away, but I understand that you've done incredible research into how virtual reality can help improve employment outcomes for ND job seekers and professionals, right? What brought you to that, and can you kind of dig into what you've done in that area?
Yes. One of the things that I discovered over in the UK when I was greatly enjoying their idea of neurodiversity as an adaptation of the human brain, not a deficit, not something wrong. They were very conscious of the sensory impact that their environments present. And one of the things I found the most appreciative was these sensory maps, which would help transition in spaces. And I came to wonder if it would have a nervous system deactivation if you understood a place before you went. So I worked with Lindenwood University and my counterpart and co-writer to discover that when you're in a virtual world, there is less external stimuli that the neurodivergent brain typically has to process, that it finds it easier to gain new information when it isn't as taxed and overstimulated by external sensory information. So that knowledge really helped us to understand if you create an external virtual environment that you'd be placing these individuals in, it would give them an ability to adjust before actually entering the space. And this work was added to thanks to an institution over in Canada that started using biometrics sensory materials to help the individual recognize their own physiological changes. one of the things I struggle with the most is interoception. So recognizing the bridge between my emotions and my neurological responses is very difficult for me. So having a wearable device that monitors if an individual has come up and scared me, if a light transition occurred, and seeing that that actually occurred in my brain is one of the ways that I've noticed a better awareness of myself and my surroundings. So this is a twofold of having a 3D space that an employee can go in, helps them acclimate prior to the actual environment. They can even customize how they feel in that space in the virtual world. And then having the attachment of biosensors to recognize the physiological changes that occur not only in the environment because of sensory information, but I used a good old Apple Watch to monitor what conversations were not psychologically safe for me by monitoring my heart rate and my blood flow to recognize which conversations required me to be more masked. And that's really where my research got a lot of traction when other people realized the potential to help individuals along the same line.
That is really, really neat. I'm very excited about VR, and I think that this is one of the most exciting areas. There's a lot of research into why a lot of ND people benefit from being able to control, even just using YouTube and using, customizing their sensory inputs. Like I'm listening to a low hum right now in my headphones, and just the ability to do things like rewind a virtual teacher instead of listening live and doing your best to take notes and struggle through it can be really, really beneficial. So I understand why starting out in the virtual can be a real game changer for a lot of ND people. Really exciting. And as far as taking metrics around physiological indicators and things like that, that's if I had data around that, I'd be able to kind of curate my life and the people around me and what's going on. I remember when my wife was in labor, a nurse came to her and told her that every time your mother comes in the room, your heart rate goes up. And because she was hooked up to all these monitors, and it was that I took a lot from that, like that there was actual physiological evidence of someone bringing stress into a room. Very, very cool. So with that, to switch gears, Gloria, you also wear a lot of hats. You've done a lot of things, and you kind of spoke to lean time as a unique task management solution. But let's dig a little bit deeper. What did you see as the kind of gap that you weren't seeing as far as solutions for people who think like you and like your partner and your kid? And what did you do to move the needle in that regard?
So we started really, I want to say we started simply, and it was because we did. My technical half has been a technical program manager, so he's on the same side of this project management. How do we get people to efficiently and effectively complete and accomplish their goals? And one thing we saw over and over again is there's always this subgroup of people who would go into a tool and immediately leave. They would be overwhelmed. And that's my own personal experience, even trying to get organized and finding the right tool that works for my brain. I would go in and I'd get overwhelmed, and then I just don't do it. And I think a lot of it is still that connection between the why. What I have seen, even with my own neurodivergence, is that the moment we make the information accessible to somebody who couldn't get it before, or didn't have a seat at the table before, it changes their entire being and how they present themselves. So I've worked with folks who are self-defeating, who I just can't get it. I don't understand why I don't get the information. And then we change the way we rephrase it and put it in the way that they need to absorb it. And all of a sudden it's like it clicks, and they can often run with it and do even better. And those are the things that when we look at it, we're like, well, let's start with one. Can we make project management simpler so that when you go in, you don't feel like running away? And so that's where we've just spent the last year of, can we do that? And now we're really getting to enter this next level for us where we get to now focus on these new ways to use AI in things that people don't normally think of. One of the features that we have built out for somebody who's neurodivergent, you usually have to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy it, it is like soul sucking and miserable. And to Jeff's point earlier of like, I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. We have a feature right now where you can rate how you feel on an emoji rating scale, from red swearing angry face to a unicorn, one of those rare tasks you'd love to see more often. And as we do that, our first layer of this is that we use AI to then help prioritize which tasks to start with. So knowing how you feel and then science-based practices, the AI then can recommend, okay, well, you hate this task, but you love this task and they have similarities. Maybe let's pair them together so it gets easier to take on the task you hate. Next phase for us for that is really, now that we know how people feel about the work and it's private and management and nobody else can see it, can we then start to make recommendations on who to assign those tasks to so that they actually enjoy the work? And then what does productivity look like when we're assigning things based on who is actually skilled and wants to do something, as opposed to, well, it's in their job description and this is who is available right now.
I love that. And I told you earlier, but I've been using Lean Time and exploring it. It's so incredible. I think it reminds me of something that we say at Potentia, that with neuroinclusivity in mind, we want to be very clear on the what we're doing and the why we're doing it, providing lots of context. And I know you stressed that. And then we want to, when possible, we want to provide as much flexibility in the when and the where and the how. Right. And I see all of that on the platform, which is really cool. And as far as customized, suggestions, as far as customized work experiences and stuff like that, I mean, there's been times in my life where I could have really used less rigidity in my job description, where somebody else could have taken a little bit of mine and I could take all of theirs, and it would have worked out a lot better. Now I have this benefit of having a very neuro-inclusive workplace, and I get to experience that all the time, where we're kind of, it's a back and forth, so to kind of automate that a little bit is really, really exciting. That's really, really neat. And so with that, Jeff, do you want to chime in here? I mean, from the perspective of an employer, like you said, you spend a lot of time in global staffing and with our programs now. Tell me about the impact on when we embrace innovations to best support and even leverage the brain, the unique brains that make up our workforce.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And as I think about this question, I think about, well, what are we talking about when we're talking about innovation? Is really a byproduct in what we see in the world of work of psychological safety, right? It's that ability to come up with alternative ways of doing something, challenging the status quo, admitting that you may be struggling in a particular area, right? All of these things. We know from Google that psychological safety is the #1 predictor of team success. And one of the byproducts of psychological safety, when practiced, with heart and integrity from, especially from your leader, is innovation. But it's also the things that lead to innovation. So employee engagement goes up, productivity goes up, actual employee retention improves. So, we want to create environments where individuals are free to innovate, but are free to be themselves more broadly, right? And so innovation is a byproduct of that psychological safety that that we should all be striving for.
For sure, yeah. Gloria, what about you? Can you talk about what you've seen as far as working with businesses and seeing the impact that using either the tools you've developed or other tools on, what happens when you do this for your workforce? What happens when you embrace the tools necessary or encourage people to embrace the tools that they feel necessary to do a good job at work and show up as themselves.
Jeff covered a lot of what's coming out in the research in terms of I don't remember who it was, right? JP Morgan, I think. Their Autism at Work program had very high success on productivity increases at an astronomical amount of 90 to 140% increase in productivity when people didn't feel like they had to hide themselves and had the support and tools that they needed. Other programs suggest that productivity goes up, period. And it's not just productivity, it's not just profitability, but in some studies, it's customer satisfaction. Because when you have happy employees who feel safe and feel at home and can have ownership of what they're doing, they naturally share that happiness and put it into what they're building. So the impact is significant, but I think you touched on something a minute ago in terms of the flexibility to get the work done.
Mm-hmm.
So even when we frame the work, we talk about strategy as this very, very high level concept of what are you trying to accomplish? But more importantly, how does the world look different when you get there? And so you paint this picture that is less rigid of what goals are supposed to look like. Instead, what we've done for years is that we create feature lists and we create requirement documentations rather than have this general idea that then allow people to innovate in between that. So when you say this is how the world is going to look different or what the impact of the world is, so for me, that it would be me saying that neurodivergent folks all of a sudden have a safe place and are better employed and businesses are doing better and the entire economy looks different. Well, that takes a ton of different paths. I don't have to be stuck on one path to get there. So when we create that flexibility, we can then bring in these ideas of exactly what Piper's doing. Like putting those pieces together, you need to have those brains with that context. And if you're not sharing it, which the studies show that companies, middle managers, I think more than half of them don't know their own company strategies. Like they're not able to distribute that information. So the people who need it, who can do the most with it, don't have it. So just improving those things and finding a way to do it more simply, I think it changes the way businesses run.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We see it all the time. And, you know, and innovation doesn't necessarily have to be an app, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the latest cutting edge technology. It's something that ND people bring to the table all the time. We think from a different perspective, and we kind of are designers by design and challengers by design, right? I've been impacted personally by things as simple as being able to record a meeting instead of taking notes live, right? Or this handy dandy timer that I use on my desk all day, every day. Or when iPhone alarms, when I first got my first iPhone and started leveraging iPhone alarms, and now I have 100 of them go off every day. And I see more clarity, more a higher sense of belonging and confidence in myself, and then productivity and engagement and you know, employee happiness whenever I have one of these little breakthroughs where I say, oh yeah, I use this now. And right now it's actually lean time. I'm very excited about it. But what about some does anyone have any other examples of like kind of individual impact on
Dave, I'm
Yeah.
gonna interrupt because two things came up that I really wanted to point on.
Please.
One, Gloria mentioned that there are incredible programs within corporations that are making great strides, not only in helping express what neuroinclusion might be, which I think is an innovation in itself, a corporation that understands that neurodiversity is essential to have a concept around the brain shared with everyone. Again, Gloria, middle management, you can have some amazing talent, but unless your managers and your middle management are aware of what these people bring, it won't help with the psychological safety. So we've mentioned, I think every one of you, the importance, the productivity and all that. I want to bring to the awareness of what happens when you don't have psychological safety. So my research really came to recognize how often I was talking to individuals where if they had one bad review or one meeting where they didn't feel that they were given the context, the amount of negative bias that often occurs in the neurodivergent brain means it's not just a meeting they can shake off. Having the use of PIPs or performance reviews without a context can be crippling to individuals who may not have a self-confidence level or sense of identity that many assume most adults walk around with. The occurrences of especially autistic women or neurodivergent women that I talk to who felt that they had a manager that not only didn't understand their brain, but wasn't willing to make an effort to learn it, resulted in a self-rejection and a self-hatred to that individual. The way the neurodivergent brain works is in fight or flight, your prefrontal is going to be limited. So if you're scared in a meeting, you're not going to have quick answers. You're going to seem confronted. You're going to seem on edge. So as great as it is to have psychological safety, I think there's a vast majority of managers and individuals who don't realize it's not about making someone feel comfortable. There are those, it's about making them feel less scared just walking into a potential bad meeting with you. So I want to bring that up more so as where we could be heading for innovation, where those who feel weakened by the system of conflict management not always being sensitive or understanding the neurodivergent brain, the necessity of considering that is the only way that these programs are going to thrive and be able to lead outside of their pipelines. So thank you for letting me throw the kind of bummer to the positivity of productive and the amazing things that are happening. For those who aren't in these pipelines and don't feel safe, it is a serious life-threatening situation.
It's no bummer. I really appreciate it. I think you know, the last thing we want to do is come off as like toxic positive about this kind of stuff. It is complicated and it is an uphill, I don't want to say battle, but it's an uphill thing. You know, and we've seen a lot more, you know, I've experienced personally a lot more experiences like that than I have positive ones. You know, I'm very lucky to work in kind of a bubble and a neuro-inclusive bubble of people walking the walk and talking the talk, you know. But I've absolutely seen plenty of that. Does anyone have any examples of kind of a turnaround of you know, from feeling a lack of psychological safety, a lack of support, and a lack of encouragement to use the tools that they need to be set up for success, to things going the other way for them? Besides me, I could talk about me all day. I think we all know that.
Sure.
But any others, Jeff?
Yeah, I want to echo what Piper said, because I think it's so important. We talk to a lot of companies that have pretty good cultures, and you know, are really trying to lean in on this and do the right things. One of the things that we share with them is that the neurodistinct individual who is working in your organization today has a long life history, and they may have had some really challenging experiences in the past that carry forward to today. So, you know, maybe they disclosed to a boss and it didn't go well with a previous employer, right? And so you want to understand that it isn't enough just to create you know, a welcoming environment. You actually have to go the extra mile. You have to go the extra step to affirm that you are a psychologically safe environment. You have to show that. You have to demonstrate that, because some of your neurodistinct workers are going to come in with some bad experiences in their past. I think of an individual who we worked with, and I met him, you know, before we were considering him for one of our programs, and he's very introverted. He came to the meeting with a job coach and his mom, and they did all the talking, and he didn't say a word. Fast forward, he's been in a program that we help to identify and just connect the dots with. He's doing all the work. The client's doing all the work. You know, we had a small role to play in it. But I remember last year I had an opportunity to speak in front of about 300 people, and I thought, you know, I'm going to reach out to that individual and just see how he's doing, on the off chance that he might, because I knew his perspective would be incredibly valuable. And he gave a speech that was just held the audience for you know, a half an hour. Just was remarkable. And I'm thinking, is this the same person that I met 3 years ago? Now that individual, we didn't cure his autism. His employer didn't cure his autism. He's autistic. That's part of his neurotype, right? But the confidence with which he was able to greet that situation, having now been surrounded by a more supportive environment, was profound, and it far exceeded my expectations. I just really quickly wanted to pivot, maybe to a little bit different one, because we talk about change, and I want to talk about change from the manager perspective, right? This is a manager. We're working with a CIO individual who I believe is neurotypical, but you know, had been working on some of our programs. And he told me, and he called me out of the blue, and he said, "I just want to thank you." And I said, "Well, great, but what did we do?" And he said, "Well, since we've had this program, we've been hiring people through Potentia, and it's become publicized. I've had 5 or 6 different people who've approached me one-on-one in my organization and told me that they themselves were neurodistinct." Awesome. And he said, "And I want to tell you, I've got a well-earned reputation as a bit of a hard ass." This is a direct quote. And he said, I expect a lot of my people, but he said, I could not have scripted a better opportunity for me to show that I really care about my people as individuals than what happened as a result of this program. And so it changed him as a leader. So when we're talking about psychological safety and these types of things, we can talk about the change that the worker can enjoy, and it's profound. I would say it can also change leaders and companies in equally as profound ways.
For sure. Yeah. And to kind of move on from the specific tools to how ND professionals drive innovation overall when they do feel supported and they are in psychologically safe environments. I mean, I guess we're all, not to toot our horns too much, but toot, right? We're all innovators on this call, an ND majority call. So how does truly supporting and embracing the brains of your workforce actually end up driving innovation? Gloria, can you talk about that? I mean, I assume that, you know, lean time came from your brain, right? So I assume you felt that your operating system, not your computer operating system, but your brain was to your benefit in that, right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I'll throw out kind of 2 scenarios. One is probably more straightforward, where I've seen having somebody who feels supported and comfortable enough to speak up when it's important. Particularly in this scenario, they were an engineer, and they were very, very detail oriented and thorough, which you tend to see, or can tend to see, more in autistics than other neurotypes. And he was so thorough to the point where there were a bunch of people on the team that he was, for lack of a better way to put it, he was driving them crazy, is how they would describe it. And they would, not to his face, but they would privately be complaining about him on a regular basis. And it's about perspective. From an employer and a management, you want that employee. As a product manager, what I was doing there at that time, that meant that employee was going to prevent me from making technical debt, making mistakes, building the wrong thing, building the inefficient thing. It meant that I was going to be building the most thorough and understood thing that I possibly could have been building. And so when I worked with him, I loved it. But it was that perspective change. And so often teams and management, if you don't set the right tone, we go into things with this oh, it's inconvenient to me. Oh, it's inconvenient to me, rather than looking at, well, what does this all bring together? What does this bring to our team when we're looking and pulling it all in? The other scenario I would throw in there in terms of innovation is not just what it does on the outside of product innovation, but also what it can do on your internal teams in terms of creating a cohesive, innovative environment in that psychological safety zone. I worked at a very busy health tech startup for a while, and I probably was not very disclosing to upper management, but I worked so closely with so many people that I was constantly self-disclosing. And I found that the more often I self-disclosed, the more often folks came back to me and said that, hey, I have this too. And so it allowed me to start creating and distilling empathy in other locations. So where that situation would come up where I had two teams that were at each other's throats. And that was perpetuated by behaviors in the upper management and how they were positioning whose pieces of work were more priority. And so this was creating a huge conflict. But the more I was able to realize, okay, well, what this team is going through and then what the other team is going through, I could start dropping, hey, but did we think about it from this perspective? Did we think about it from this perspective? And it's the ability to open up and think, it's that context again. And for work management and project management, I think the research actually shows that it's like 70-something% of a project success actually depends on human soft skills, as opposed to like, how well can we make a task list or make a pretty Gantt chart and a timeline? It's how well can we bring these dynamics together? And companies will know, and they will know when those things are in place because it feels great, it's seamless, but they often don't know how can they create it themselves, and they know when it's gone. But finding that right thing is something that I think you guys are incredibly doing, and where I want to be as well with our tools, naturally creating those environments and changing those perspectives.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I really didn't understand my potential until I learned about the accommodations or the understood needs within pipelines. So when I started doing research about all of the companies that saw this heavy level of value to the specific pipeline, I wanted to understand how they were training their managers and how they were modifying the programs. And that's when I learned about accommodations, because though I'd been meeting all these amazing people and sharing all this neurotype, I had no idea. And I've come to discover quite frequently, the autistic brain doesn't know what it doesn't know it should be using. And until someone gives us the words, the framework, the toolbox, we have no idea usually. So that term, isn't it obvious? I heard that so often. It started to become an internalized failure feeling when everyone would ask me that, because to me, I was still living in the deficit of always coming up with the wrong answer, always being the odd, quirky response. And when I started seeing that there were pipelines of having everything written, that blew my mind. The audio processing delay or disorder that is pretty common amongst most neurodivergents had been something that I'd internalized as having an issue listening to people. And when the use of captions was mandated for most neurodivergents and I started using it, the softness with which I approached meetings completely changed, knowing that I could have their vocal announcement at the bottom and still be able to actively eye contact and engage was a tool I didn't even know would be so simple to completely change my work experience. So now I can walk in to any project and be like, if you do need me to know this, please follow up. Don't just tell me quickly in a meeting, my brain won't save it. So having the toolkits that now are a universal It's best to have a follow-up meeting if you've given things orally, or it's best to give instructions in the way it is easiest for them. Are they auditory? Are they sensory for tactile? Are they visual? I now realize my whole life is a visual extravagance of continuous images in my head. So having to stop for auditory information switches my brain, and it can be a delay. That's very hard for some people to even understand. So it's a lot to bring in for new meetings. I would just avoid conversations for a lot of my early career. Now I know it's not that I'm bad at conversations, I just come at a very different angle. So meeting Dave and having the easiest time communicating, I'm very excited to talk with Gloria offhand, is not an existence I knew prior to knowing my brain type. And that's what leads me to do this work, is the more I can convince people to self-internalize their brain type to be kinder, the better we are in every aspect of employment and kindness and communication skills. It's just easier with a dose of empathy that I think we're lacking because we just don't have enough awareness of our brain types.
Yeah. Enough awareness of our brain types, or just understanding that everyone thinks and operates differently, and encouraging people to explore what works for them and to try new things, and then to stop those new things, to try something else, right? When people ask me why I use a fidget spinner or a stress ball while I'm talking, I gave a TEDx in October and I had a stress ball in my hand while I was giving it, and that wasn't really like, something we discussed before or whatever. And someone asked me why I do it, and I say, well, if it's while I'm talking to you, I can hear you better while I'm using this. I mean, call that an innovation if you want, but it's true. And the how people defined me being fidgety before was that if you're not facing me using eye contact, or taking notes in class or whatever, you're not listening, right? But like, I can hear you better and I could speak better when I have, when I have these little things that set me up for success. But everyone is different. That might be the worst for somebody else, right? So just giving as much flexibility in how we all operate day to day really drives this stuff forward. And it identifies new innovations, because I guarantee you Gloria's platform is not just made for autistics and ADHDers, right? It's great for everyone. And when you start with asking yourselves how to best support people with those really unique cognitive profiles, you really do elevate everybody, right?
Because understanding the cognitive profiles really do help. I'm constantly surprised when we have conversations with the older generations or with veterans, that they will be aware that they likely have a activated nervous system due to the past, but they're not aware how their brain reacts. So having that ability, as you said, you can hear better, that grounding technique. I would prefer to be walking around and even particularly dancing during this conversation, but I've adapted my entire experience to sit still and look at the camera, despite I would rather be dancing. And so having people say, would you like a walking meeting? My body gets excited because I know my greatest struggle is blood flow. And if I'm sitting at a desk for too long, it's very likely that I'm going to lose attention or my excitement bubble quite naturally, because gravity is lowering my blood flow from my prefrontal. So just having the option to adapt what people consider normal working environments is essential for, I think, the way we're going to move forward. It's not going to be everyone return to the office. It's going to be, how can we assist with your nervous system to make you excited to come in to whatever your space is in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If possible, I'd love to chime in on that. But there's often a lot of responsibility forced on the neurodivergent to be responsible for these alternatives. And that's where I want to in the future really see a shift in a company's ownership and responsibility of, these are my employees and I'm going to take care of them. because not everyone has that opportunity to know what actually works for them. So I've talked to people who click their pens and they're like, oh no, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, that's brilliant. You should be doing that. There's research that shows the waves in your brain are more than likely processing different. And when you do that, you activate more things. And then you can take in what you need to do. That's not wrong. I'm more confident when I stand at a desk and I give presentations than if I'm sitting at a desk giving presentations. Like, these are small things that we're trained to do, but then we push back on the neurodivergent individual. Like, having someone come in and ask these questions when you make an office, hey, how do you like to sit? Most of us have developed these natural ways of fixing these problems ourselves, but we don't, to Piper's point, we don't always have the words for them. So when somebody else opens that conversation, it's easier to find it.
Definitely. That brings me to, I want to point this to Jeff, if that's okay, Jeff. I've seen things go all sorts of ways, and I understand that a lot of the corporations that we support are really huge, and they use Windows instead of Apple computers for a reason, let's say. So it's not always easy when you're encouraging psychological safety to make everything possible. Like, there are rigidities around the world of work, and that can be somewhat limiting sometimes. But we also see how, when you are able to provide this kind of flexibility and encourage people to use the tools they need to be set up for success, what that brings, right? And there are incredible case studies about employee retention and engagement and productivity and belonging, and innovation going up and all that stuff from when you are able to do that. So what advice would you give to companies around how to encourage both innovation in your already neurodiverse workforce, and encouraging them to use the tools they need to be set up for success in that way?
I think, and both Gloria and Piper touched on this. The role of the leader is really critical here, in terms of setting the right culture, and just making sure that you're embodying the things that you want to see. So, the fact that I, as a manager, may not be predisposed to walking meetings, right? But if that's something that works for Piper, I should know that, and I should be thinking about the things that will help her be her happiest, most productive self. It doesn't really matter that I might not attack a task the way that she does, but that's a mindset that I should develop, right? By the same token, you touched on this a little bit earlier. There's sort of the what, why, and how of leadership and leadership communication. We want to be really clear about what we want to achieve and why we want to achieve it. Where possible, we want to leave lots of room on the how. Let individuals determine for themselves what the best way is to get things done. That's often the best pathway to innovation, right? If everything that I do is restricted by how I would solve a problem, then that's not really innovation, right? That's just your leader being really prescriptive in terms of how everything needs to be done. Now, there are some business settings where, hey, look, we're dealing with this customer. The customer's expecting a certain thing. This needs to be done a certain way. That needs to be communicated, right? That the how may be prescriptive in certain instances, but what we find in the corporate world most often is that there's more room on the how than most managers think. And by opening that up and by letting individuals experiment, you get not only more innovation, but you get more engagement. You just get a better run business, right? Because it's not limited by the individual, by the leader. And for the workers on the team, they develop a much greater sense of confidence that they can do things in ways that work best for them. And also ownership. They tend to work more on the company than just at the company, right? If you allow them to, if you create that type of environment, and that's a powerful force. I mean, when you've got a bunch of really bright, different thinking individuals who are working on the company, then you've got a competitive advantage.
And studies have shown the percentage of neurodivergent trust and commitment to an institution. These are individuals who often, as you mentioned earlier, do come with a lot of trauma. and they don't like change. They don't want to leave. So when they find a place that backs their needs and a sense of care for them, the retention rates in these programs are exceptionally high because of that wonderful feeling of finally belonging that most are seeking. And that's really, I think, what is so great to have occurring in these companies, is that moment where they recognize perhaps we aren't giving a sense of belonging to these particular individuals. And it's great that you guys are a kind of lighthouse for how to do that, how to bring the knowledge, the assistance, and the support. 80% of autistic individuals are unemployed because even getting in the door, having the soft skills, being able to communicate in a way that society finds normal is not something they know right off the bat. So it's great to have resources because they need it. It's often hard to be self-advocacy in a neurodivergent brain, and it's hard to ask for help. So having people who can help those who don't even know how to ask for help is the foreground of supporting these people.
And if I could just add on to Piper's great comments there, one of the data is pretty incontrovertible on this, that not only by hiring individuals who are neurodistinct, creating environments for those individuals, you'll have what tends to be on average a high retention worker there. When you train leaders on the types of practices that we're talking about here, that are really essential for creating a good welcoming environment for those neurodistinct individuals, they benefit everybody, and retention goes up across the board, because at the end of the day, we're all more alike than we are different. And the things that, good leadership is good leadership, right? And so the 75% of the workforce that are neurotypicals have lots of challenges and struggles and past traumas and all those things as well. When they've got a leader that's more open to different ways of working, that psychological safety piece again, it really does benefit everybody. Every worker in the organization can benefit, and as a result, the entire organization benefits.
For sure. I know we're coming up on time, so I just want to, we focused a lot on kind of advice for the employer today, but I want to acknowledge that it's so important that we're providing resources and advice and our perspectives to ND job seekers and professionals seeking employment or seeking to improve their employment outcomes, right? So let's talk about just any advice that we would give to ND professionals or job seekers on how to use and leverage technologies and programs to improve their employment experience, how to get those, how to feel okay asking for that stuff. Any advice directly to those we seek to serve and support and employ here would be awesome. Gloria, do you want to touch on that?
I will probably start by offering up myself. As we are building this tool, I'm only one neurodivergent perspective. And the product gets better the more I talk to people. So if somebody is struggling to get organized, or the thing we hear most is, I don't know where to start. Sending me an email around the system, I'm always happy to walk someone through how their brain works, and let's see what can we translate that from what you're doing in real life, and how do we make that work in the software as well. So come say hi to me, as it would be one point. The other things I think is, for me, when I was really getting to a point of finding myself in all of this, mindfulness made a really big difference. And it started as simply as just being more aware of the taste of food in my mouth, and then being more aware of my feet in the ground. And the more I found myself able to ground, the more I could see and separate myself from situations that were terrifying. And then I could look at them objectively. So for somebody who's going through this journey of either discovering their neurodivergence or how do I navigate this in the workforce, there are things that can start to make you more resilient. And as you get more resilient in this, you'll just start to add in and get that confidence that we're still waiting for the rest of the world to really jump in on.
Mindfulness, that's a great one. Mindfulness meditation, all of those pause moments, not only because it helps reset mentally, but it allows you to breathe. I'm a strong believer in that most neurodivergents are not actually breathing. They're too busy holding their breath. So we are already low on oxygen levels to begin with. So any chance you get to oxygenate outside or breathing techniques is a huge one. I wake up with an activated nervous system, so I wake up scared every day. So I have to start my day with getting my blood flow ready, monitoring my caffeine intake, deciding if I'm going to take a stimulant that day or if it's going to set me off even more in a trigger. So my day is kind of stacked like a Jenga game, but asking myself, what am I most scared of today, is where I have to start my day. And if it's because of work, I have to acknowledge that. If it's because I didn't take care of myself, but that's what I need to start with. Recognizing what I need is the only way I'm going to be able to then present 100% of myself in my job or my career. So the mindfulness and the breathing is just the start to the difficulty of understanding your brain and helping the negative bias overcome what you're scared about when it comes to the horrifying career search that everyone is struggling with, not just neurodivergence.
Agreed. We're coming up on time. Jeff, anything?
No, I just thank you to our great guests. They hit it out of the park. So I wouldn't add anything else other than just thank you.
Yeah. I was going to say that. Thank you both so much. Thank you all so much. We look forward to continuing the conversation with both you and other, amplifying other ND voices and change makers within this space. And to everyone else at home, thank you for joining from around the globe. If you're not following us on social, do so. Check us out at potentialworkforce.com, and we'll be sure to put up clips from this and to link link Piper and Gloria. So look out for that, and we appreciate you. We'll see you really soon. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.